Welcome to The Art of Adventure. This is episode 221 with Ashe Oro. The Art of Adventure is the podcast that helps you travel the world, run your business, and find peak performance. You can find the show notes for this episode and all the other ones at derekloudermilk.com. Today's episode is brought to you by Superconductors. It's a book that I wrote coming out in July 2018, which, depending on when you're listening to this, is next month. So you can get it wherever you buy your books. And I also want to mention there'll be several episodes of The Art of Adventure surrounding superconductors. There'll be some excerpts as I record the audiobook, which I'm planning to start doing here. And also there's an episode about how the book got made and the publishing process for those of you that are interested in publishing your own books. I recommend that one. On today's episode, Ashe Oro and I recorded this podcast interview in person in Bali. And we also call him Uncle Ashe around my household because we were neighbors, next door neighbors in Bali, and he would babysit. He would watch my son, Axel, from time to time, and Axel would shout across the, so basically across the grounds, he was like, Uncle Ashe! And we would know that it was time for them to hang out. So I got to know him pretty well for 3 months, essentially living in the same place in Bali. And I knew I needed to get him on the show because every time we had a conversation, I would learn a ton about cryptocurrency, about blockchain, about money, about geopolitics, about the history of taxation, you name it. And his area of expertise is the world of finance from many different angles. He's been a banker. He helped start an offshore bank, and he's been in the blockchain and crypto world since the very beginning. And he's also the founder of Liberty Entrepreneurs. We're not going to talk much about that today, but that's a VA service that he runs to help people get more freedom with their businesses. But this episode, we'll talk a lot about theory and philosophy of just how crypto and blockchain works, how money works, how banking works, and governments, and all kinds of things that I am pretty much a beginner. So you will definitely hear me ask questions that a beginner would ask. If you're not an expert already, this is a great episode for you because I bring you right along with me as I'm a total beginner. And we're also drinking wine, chilled wine, because it's hot in Bali. But it probably helps me ask stupid questions, which I might normally be too embarrassed to ask. So, really fascinating episode, fascinating guest. Without further ado, here is Ashe Oro. Welcome back to The Art of Adventure, and I'm here with Ashe Oro. Welcome to the podcast.
What's up? Thanks for having me.
And Ashe happens to be my
Neighbor,
housemate, villa, compound
sharer, friend.
Sharer. So Ashe also has a podcast called libertyentrepreneurs.com. And we are going to be on each other's podcasts. So here's him on this show, and he's a really interesting guy. He's actually the first person that has really explained cryptocurrencies to me, or the first person that I've been curious enough to ask about. So we'll partly talk about that. And he wound up in Bali with a previous guest of the show, Patricia Parkinson, and they are business partners and romantic partners.
Oh.
If we're allowed to talk about that.
Ooh.
So you said before we started recording, you've been a digital nomad for about 6 years.
6 years.
So how did you get here to Bali? What was the chain of locations and?
Yeah. So I was working as an engineer. I went to university for electrical and computer engineering, and I thought that was going to be the thing that did it for me. You know, growing up, all the people with the big houses and the nice cars were either doctors, lawyers, and engineers, and I could never look at blood or cut things open. You know, I skipped the day in high school where we had to dissect a frog, because I'm not all about that life. And I knew that law sucked, and I didn't want to be stuck up in books and courtrooms all the time. So I was like, well, I got one other chance, and that's becoming an engineer. So that's what I did. And so I worked my ass off and graduated with these 2 BS degrees in engineering. And I was an engineer and a programmer and doing technical support for 7 years. I actually worked for the government for a year straight out of college, and I was a C++ developer for the hovercraft for the Navy.
Cool.
And it's called the LCAC, if you want to look it up. Landing Craft Air Cushion, or Landing Cushion Aircraft, or some shit like that.
Sweet.
But I saw the day that I knew and this is before I was a libertarian, the day that I knew I had to get out of the government is when I was down in the lab. I had just built a piece of software. I needed to upload it to the hardware. And I didn't wear my little grounding wrist strap, which prevented electrical shock, and I blew up $15,000 worth of hardware. And I was so scared, and I didn't want to tell my superior. And I knew that I had to, because it was a piece of hardware. They're going to, I can't just throw it in a garbage can, because they keep account of all this stuff. And so I went up and I told him, and he's like, all right, go back down to the lab and I'll be down there soon. And I was like, oh shit. I'm in some deep stuff. And him and everyone else from the office came down in this little parade and paraded around me, and they're like, congrats, you're officially part of the team. And I was like, this is not right. $15,000 in hardware that I just blew up, and here they're parading around me, cheering me that I'm officially a part of the team now. And so I knew I had to get back into the private sector, the free market.
Because they had all blown up something?
Because they had all blown up something. And now it's this is the inauguration. This is yes, you're one of us now. And so I left that job and I went into the private sector for a company called Slick Edit, which I was a tech support guy, because I figured out very quickly that even though I was an okay developer, I was able to communicate. I was able to be that bridge between developer, marketing, sales, and customer much more strongly than just developing. And so I worked there for 6 years, so 7 years as an engineer total. And I had, in my free time, because I had a lot of downtime at the job, and I had full range over the internet. We didn't have any restrictions on the internet. And so I found this thing called Ron Paul. And I've been apolitical up to that point. And he was talking about something called individual rights and individual responsibility, and started to help me shape my ideas around freedom, individual freedom. And I'd never really thought of this stuff before. I just kind of assumed that government and taxes is just something we have, and it's like death and taxes, right? Mm-hmm. And so he helped me understand the ideas of personal liberty and during his 07-08 campaign. And I was really active. I was one of those guys making the signs and marching on Washington and organizing people on Meetup and, the whole shebang. And I used to wake up every morning. I was dating a girl at the time. And every morning, instead of giving her my attention, I'd wake up and run to my computer and see if there was a Ron Paul interview, or if he was on the news, or if he was talking about economics and he was talking about this impending stock market crash that we all knew happened about a year later.
Oh, wow.
And when that happened, the election was over, and I was like, where do I spend all my time? Now, I used to wake up every morning and search for Ron Paul videos and interviews. What do I do with my life now? And it was about the same time that the stock market was crashing, the housing bubble was bursting, and he had been talking about this, and I was like, whoa. I was like, I know this guy can't see the future, so how did he know this stuff? And so I looked up, I was like, who gave Ron Paul financial and economic advice during his presidential campaign?
Yeah.
And it was this guy named Peter Schiff. And so Peter Schiff happened to have a Wednesday podcast called Wall Street Unspun. It's 2 hours or so, and I'd tune in every Wednesday and listen, how did these guys know? Because I'd lost 50% of my 401k, and I was like, this is bullshit.
Right.
How am I going to prevent myself from losing this much money again? And so I started listening to this guy, Peter Schiff, and fell down a rabbit hole of what's called Austrian economics. If you want to check it out, Mises Institute, and started learning about praxeology and economics, but not economics like that boring stuff you learn in university, that crap they just fill your head full of to confuse you and think economics is this dull science, but economics as a soft science, basically more along the lines of psychology and sociology.
How people make decisions.
Right, rather than a hard science like chemistry or physics. And I don't know a single economics equation, but I consider myself an economist. And I really started understanding the very intricate and beautiful nature of how economics and money is intrinsically tied to the amount of personal freedom that you're able to obtain in your life. And it really sent me on down a deep rabbit hole. And so one day, Peter Schiff had changed the format. He went to a 5-day-a-week podcast, basically a radio show at that point, for 2 hours. And I thought this was the best thing ever, right? I was like, finally, I can because whenever I get interested in something, I go all in, I kind of shut everything else out. And I really go down as deep as rabbit holes I can. And so I'd listen to this thing every day. And, it's a political, financial, and economics podcast, radio show called The Peter Schiff Show. It's still live. I don't listen to him as much anymore. But one day he said he was ranting about regulations and how it's crushing the United States economy. And he owns a set of brokerage companies around the states called Your Pacific Capital. And he was like, it's become so expensive and compliance heavy that I can no longer serve my international clients at U.S.-based Your Pacific Capital. So I'm going to open up an offshore bank called Your Pacific Bank. And we're only going to service my international clients. So no U.S. people, no U.S. citizens or residents or no U.S. taxpayers, because that's what creates all of this expensive compliance overhead. And we're only going to serve international clients. And I'm looking for people to work at it for me, with me.
Ooh, and that piqued your interest.
And that piqued my interest. And, I was kind of tired of working the 9 to 6 cube job as an engineer at that point. It went a couple years where I was getting good raises at, the software company. And then the raises went to 2% and 3% and 5%. And I was like, I feel like I've maxed out here. So I had about $25,000 saved in the bank. This is 2012. And I was like, you know what? I can probably live on $1,500 a month, which this gives me, over a year and a half of living.
Yeah, I think we've all done that at some point. How long can I live?
Yeah, for sure. It's what type of runway do I have? And this is a commission-only job. It was a commission-only sales job. And I had never worked a commission-only job before. I'd never worked a sales job before. But I was so confident in my understanding of economics, specifically gold and silver. He was a big gold and silver guy. And this was a bank that what hooked me was, we're not like any other bank. We don't make loans, because I thought the fractional reserve lending that banks do and how they increase the money supply and then a couple loans go bad and it ripples throughout the entire system and brings the banks down. I thought that this fractional reserve nature of the government's money was one of the main factors that contributed to the financial collapse. And so I was going to work at a bank that not only didn't make loans with customers' money, so we actually kept 100% of customers' money on deposit, but we also offered gold-backed and silver-backed bank accounts with a partnership at the Perth Mint out in Australia, so that you could get out of the government's fiat inflationary system and secure and protect your wealth in hard metals, hard assets, sound money, gold and silver, things that even back in the Roman years, an ounce of gold could buy, a really nice toga. And so it's been around for a lot longer than any government money has. And I was on a mission to help people secure their wealth with a bank that wasn't going to risk their assets on deposit, but also give them an ability to facilitate gold and silver-backed bank accounts. And we offered a debit card that you could go around and spend it anywhere MasterCard was available, so you could easily spend your gold and silver. So that's what got me out of the 9 to 5 engineering cube life and on the road, because I sold all my stuff and I basically said goodbye to my friends and family and I moved down to Barbados and eventually St. Vincent and the Grenadines to work at this bank before having any type of banking, no official financial experience, no sales experience, and I've never worked commission only before.
Wow. I'm wondering about the gold and silver, because those are limited valuable resources, but they have no intrinsic value in themselves other than like gold is malleable,
right,
and maybe a useful conductor.
Yep.
So like we could put our worth into normal fiat currency, into gold, into land, into cryptocurrencies. Why are gold and silver a useful way to hold value or worth?
So gold. Now, I'm not going to make the logical fallacy of saying just because something has held value that it will hold value, right? It's not an appeal to history. But I will say gold has held value for over 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years. We even see back in the Egyptians and the Roman eras that gold was the preferred use of currency. But you got to think like, why? What are the properties of gold that people over the years have used it as money? Well, like you said, it has various uses, not so many today because mainly it's used as a wealth savings device, but it's fungible, right? So 1 ounce of gold is the same as 1 other ounce of gold. It's divisible. You can divide it, you can melt down 1 ounce of gold, and if you have 1 ounce of gold, you can melt it and divide it down into 10 individual 10th ounce golds, and it's worth the same as 1 ounce of gold. If you tear a dollar bill into 10 pieces, it's not worth the same as, it's not worth a dime.
Yeah.
It's easily recognizable, right? People see gold and they're like, oh yeah, this is gold, right? I can tell this is gold. That's why governments tend, and I don't have any of this crappy Indonesian currency on me at the moment, but you can tell that they try to color them very brightly and uniquely so that when you hand them 100,000 rupiah note, it's very bright and pink and it's very easily to identify. Mm-hmm. I can't remember I can't remember all of it, but you get the idea. There are certain properties of gold that have allowed it to be a very valuable asset that over time people have decided that maybe 1 ounce of gold is better used as money as a chicken, because a chicken has upkeep and it's going to die and it's perishable. And what happens if somebody doesn't want a chicken? And this is more of money theory. Money is half of every transaction. So if I wanted to buy this sweet Yeti microphone from you and I didn't have money, I'd be like, okay, what do you want to trade? Do you want my computer? Do you want this headset? Do you want this lamp? This is called the double coincidence of wants. I want this, but now you have to, by coincidence, you have to want whatever I have in order to make a transaction. Otherwise, you just use money. And so money is typically the most desired commodity. And when I say commodity, not only like oil and silver and gold and coal and sheepskins or whatever, but good. It's the most desirable good. And people feel okay with using it as an intermediate layer between exchange. Now, I want to come back about this whole intrinsic value thing, because this is something I hear over and over. And I used to think the same thing. Like, I used to argue, or I'd have to defend gold. Like, what's the intrinsic value of gold? And you see this with Bitcoin as well now. Well, what's the intrinsic value of Bitcoin? I argue that intrinsic value doesn't exist. And this is the most basic, fundamental root argument of Austrian economics as developed by Karl Menger and then furthered by Ludwig von Mises and Murray Rothbard. Objective value or intrinsic value does not exist because value is perceived in someone's mind. So all value is subjective. So to me, I'm currently drinking wine. I have no desire for water, right? Water at this moment has zero value to me. But you could say, but water is essential for life. Like, it has intrinsic value. I don't want water, right? I don't value water. Or you could say gold. If there were 1 million tons of gold on Mars, how much value would it have? Well, none, because it can't be used up there. Humans can't do anything with it, right? It's just sitting up there as a big rock. And so if all value is subjective and intrinsic value doesn't exist, the value that gold gets is the same way that the value of anything is. It's merely supply and demand. So if people are demanding gold for whatever reason, it doesn't matter. Maybe they think it makes their grill piece bling out, right? Maybe they think that they can wire up their DVD player. Look how old I am, DVD player. Maybe whatever, right? Or maybe they think that it makes a good, I don't know, right? In silver, maybe they think that it does well in electrical circuits or in the medical industry. But it doesn't matter why people use a certain good. It's that they demand it and they want to use it that creates a market for it and creates the price.
Gotcha. Okay. So the money or whatever you're using as money doesn't have to have any intrinsic value. It just has to.
It can't have intrinsic value.
Can't.
Intrinsic value doesn't exist.
Okay. All right. Interesting. So when we first met, you said that you've been funding your lifestyle with cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
What does that mean? That you're no longer buying things with normal paper money, or what does that mean exactly?
Right. So one thing I found out quickly after leaving the engineering job and moving to the bank, and if you want to look it up, it's a really good bank, and there's a lot of reasons not to have your money in a bank these days. But if you are, and you're not an American citizen or resident, then Euro Pacific Bank is a good one. I have no affiliation with them anymore, no affiliate program, nothing. But I found working at the bank that the banking system, the global banking system, makes it as difficult as possible to get access to other currencies, to open up bank accounts in other countries, and to facilitate transactions around the world. And so one interesting thing that cryptocurrency does is it is a payment rail. It competes with the payment rails of the international banks, most specifically the SWIFT system, and you can look it up, SWIFT. It's only SWIFT in name, though, not in the time that it takes to send money around the world. It's like, it's like the Patriot Act or something. It was like the Anti-Patriot Act because it diminished our privacy and our rights. But okay, so we got the SWIFT system. The SWIFT system is just a means of transferring value around the world, be it dollars or pounds sterling, euro, yen, whatever, Swiss francs. Cryptocurrencies came out, and not only were they money, like the US dollar, but they were also the payment method, the payment rail, like the SWIFT system. So now, built into the code of Bitcoin, you have an opportunity to hold an asset, Bitcoin, and then use the payment rail of the Bitcoin network to send it around the world. And so what I'm able to do is, have various cryptocurrencies, and I'm not sponsoring, I'm not affiliated with any cryptocurrencies. I'm definitely not recommending you buy. You find what coin people are looking for, and even in this bear market that we're in, people still see it as a good investment or buying opportunity. And you trade them the coin, be it Bitcoin or Ethereum or Litecoin or whatever you've heard of. People want to buy this stuff, and they'll give you cash for it. And so I live a very cash-based life because I don't want to use the banks if I don't have to. I was the guy in the bank preventing people from sending money out or receiving money in and making them send me a notarized copy of their passport and their utility bill and a bank reference signed by their bank manager. And if you received X amount of dollars and we weren't familiar with who was sending it to you, or you didn't tell us what the business was, or maybe between that person, or maybe you didn't send us a contract or an invoice, then we would just not book your money and we'd send it back to the sender. And think about what that does for your business or even for your personal life. With cryptocurrency, there is no intermediary. And so I could send you $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, and you could give me $1,000 worth of Thai baht, for instance, or Indonesian
rupiah.
Rupiah, yeah, right. And it would just be a one-on-one transaction, it's a P2P transaction, and we wouldn't need the permission from anyone else. And that's what I've been doing for the past 12 months or so, because I find it's cheaper. I don't have to pay currency exchange rates. I don't have to worry about my credit card getting shut down. My debit card charged me for international withdrawals. It's a lot safer because it can't be skimmed from a little card scanner. You stick an ATM here. If you go up to one of the gas stations or something, they've replaced it. It's a lot safer. I'm in control of it, and I don't have to trust anyone else like a bank to either hold my money or to facilitate it. So Yeah, it's been really interesting. I would say not a lot of people are doing this yet, but it really aids and supports the digital nomadic lifestyle.
Can you talk about individual freedom? Because I think everyone comes at being a digital nomad or even an entrepreneur because they want to create more autonomy, freedom, control over how they're spending their time, where they can live, when they wake up, all of these things. So how does traditional banking system and traditional government dampen that freedom, and how does crypto fit in with sort of increasing individual freedom?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And, digital nomads and people who travel are the type of people who desire freedom. Now, they may or may not really understand it, but at least they desire it. So this is one reason why I like traveling, especially up in Chiang Mai, Thailand, where I just spent 5 months, is a lot of people want to experience other cultures. They want to open their eyes to other opportunities. They want to build something for themselves and be that self-sustaining. This is why on my podcast, Liberty Entrepreneurs, I try to interview digital entrepreneurs, not brick and mortar entrepreneurs, but digital entrepreneurs, because then you build your business up in the internet, up in the cloud, and you're kind of free to travel as long as the government allows you to have your slave card, your passport, so that you're entered into these countries. But that's a whole nother conversation. With cryptocurrency, just like with building your own business online, you're trying to reduce the counterparty risk of third parties. So if you have an employer, for instance, well, that's a counterparty risk. What if your employer goes out of business? What if they don't make a profit and can't pay you? Or what if they fire you? Well, now to sustain your lifestyle and your income, you have to kind of trust and believe in, and it's kind of like a crutch of your employer to provide for you. Whenever you build for yourself, you build your own cash flowing businesses online, you've removed one counterparty risk in your life. And by counterparty risk, I mean having to rely on someone or something else. And I'm not saying, be this lone wolf that doesn't connect with people, but specifically I'm speaking financially.
Okay.
What cryptocurrency does is it allows you to own your money. Just like building a digital business allows you to own your cash flow and income, cryptocurrency allows you to own your money. Because you can't easily spend US dollars here. Okay, well, you can't spend Bitcoin. I get it, right? But dollars, unless they're cash dollars in your pocket, and who's going to keep their life savings in their pocket? Well, nobody. You have to trust a bank is going to do right with your money, because you're going to keep it in a bank, or you're going to keep it in the stock market. But then you have to trust that the company you're invested in is going to do right in their company, that's going to continually appreciate or at least hold steady the value of that stock so that you don't lose your savings. So, holding money in a bank, holding money in the stock market, basically every investment idea that the government and standard mainstream financial analysts and people tell you introduces more and more counterparty risk into your life. What cryptocurrency does, it allows you the ability to store your wealth in an asset, kind of like a gold, where gold removes the counterparty risk of the banking system, but you still have the counterparty risk of the physical world. You still have to carry this stuff with you. How are you going to carry? Let's say you're semi-wealthy and you have 100 ounces of gold. I think gold is at like $1,300. So you got over $100,000 worth of gold. Okay, maybe you can carry that around with you, right? 10 ounces of gold. I mean, you go through the airport. They've got precious metals detectors that you walk through. I think most people call them metals detectors. But they're going to pick up on this stuff, right? It's very dense. They're going to pick up on this stuff. And so they're going to be like, yo, and I've traveled with ounces of silver. I've traveled with like 10-ounce bars of silver with me. And every time I traveled, they thought it was a bomb because it's very dense. And they're like, what is this? And I'm like, well, this is silver. Why do you have this silver? I'm like, my grandfather gave it to me for good luck. Whatever. Like, fuck off. Sorry. But you have that counterparty risk of having to either store this on your person or store this in a vault somewhere. And that's why I really love the bank, your Pacific Bank, because we allowed you to travel the world while retaining gold and silver, but gave you the liquidity of a MasterCard so you could spend it anywhere. Right? This is before I really understood cryptocurrencies. With cryptocurrencies, you don't need to trust the banks. You don't need to trust the government to do right with your money and make sure it stays valuable and they don't print too much of it and depreciate it, right? Because Bitcoin, for instance, is very transparent. You know exactly the inflation rate. You know exactly how many Bitcoins are going to be created. You know when they're going to be created, right? So it's an open, opt-in, opt-out, very transparently visible system, economic system. But you also shed the inconveniences of the physical world as well, like the gold world, having to either trust someone to store this stuff for you or carry the gold on you while you travel. So Bitcoin gives you the ability to not only hold your money in the internet, but also send and receive it as well without having to need, a bank or financial institution. So think about the freedom that gives one person to be able to travel around the world and just shed another huge element of counterparty risk in your life. You're almost your entire financial counterparty risk.
Okay, I have lots of questions that come up. So is there no risk to holding cryptocurrency?
Yeah, so there's no risk in nothing. Double negative. Of course there's risk, right? The main risk of cryptocurrency is the capital risk. So the capital appreciation or depreciation. Like if you bought Bitcoin at $18,000, well, now it's at $8,000 and you're not looking so good. But this comes with anything you own. Like you buy a car, it's going to depreciate. You buy stocks, maybe they depreciate. Hell, even the money in your pocket, the government money, depreciates because they keep creating more and more of it. So you've got the capital risk of crypto. You also have a technology risk. Like maybe this technology isn't adopted. Maybe it's too inconvenient or it's too ahead of its time, right? Kind of like Betamax was. And it just can't get adopted. But then that's going to be associated with the capital risk. If it can't be adopted, people don't start using it, it's going to affect the price. The price is going to go down because of lack of demand. You also have the risk of, I don't know how to manage a Bitcoin wallet. And there's a lot of good Bitcoin wallets out now. But what if you don't understand what a private key is or a public key? And you start throwing these things around the internet and you accidentally send someone or post your private key online, and that's all they need to clean out your entire Bitcoin account. Everyone, if I gave you an ounce of gold and I was like, Derek, here's a free ounce of gold, protect this. What would you do? Just right off the top of your head. How would you protect an ounce of gold, a physical ounce of gold?
I'd probably wear it.
You could wear it, right? You could put it in your shoe. You could store it in your underwear drawer. You'd dig a hole in the back of your yard and bury it there and hide it, right? Maybe even put it in a safety deposit box at the bank. People know how to protect the physical world. We've been doing it for a long time. You lock your door with a key, right? You shut your windows. Everybody knows this. You hide it in your closet. We're entering into a world of digital scarcity. Just like the entire physical world is built up out of scarcity. Right? There's only so many of these microphones. There's only so many of these computers. There's only so much fresh air. Right? There's only so much wine, unfortunately. But scarcity online we haven't had before Bitcoin. Bitcoin was the first blockchain. And so blockchains introduced a way that we could have scarcity online and trade this new scarce good back and forth. So that's why Bitcoin's first application was money. Think about it. Are funny cat photos scarce? Thank goodness they're not, right? But funny cat photos don't make a very good money because I could just copy it.
And the internet is based on copying.
On abundance.
Endlessly, yeah.
Right. So Bitcoin solved this crazy, and I can't remember the name of it now, but I think like two generals problem or something like that. But it solved this crazy computer science problem that had been around for decades and decades that now allowed scarcity without having to trust a central party. Because we have had, and I'm just kind of rambling on, is this all right?
This is good. This is good.
All right. So before Bitcoin, we had scarcity on the internet, but you had to trust a centralized authority. Maybe it was your domain name, www.libertyentrepreneurs.com. Well, there aren't two libertyentrepreneurs.com, but I had to trust GoDaddy to make sure that they protected that for me. Or maybe info@libertyentrepreneurs.com. Well, nobody else has that, right? That's specific to me. Mm-hmm. But I had to trust, whoever to protect that email address so that nobody else could take it. That trust, again, is a counterparty risk. With Bitcoin, with cryptocurrencies, you get the scarcity that we've seen in a domain name or an email, or my favorite back in the day, an America Online Instant Messenger name, which I probably had 50 of because I thought I was awesome. But you no longer have to trust a third party to keep that scarce for you. The scarcity comes from how the Bitcoin protocol was created. And so you don't have to trust anyone. Bitcoin's not a company. It's an open source software protocol, kind of like email. Nobody owns email. Well, nobody owns Bitcoin. But rather than email, where you can just forward an email to somebody and you have a copy and they have a copy, how Bitcoin was built as an open source protocol, if you send the Bitcoin to someone, it's a global distributed accounting ledger. I no longer have it, and that person I sent it to has it. And I don't know how we got to that, but why'd I ramble on about that?
So why was there a specific... So it solved this decades-old problem, but was there a specific tipping point that let Bitcoin be created when it was, or why did it come about?
Yeah. So Bitcoin was created, I believe it was on early January of 2009. And if you think back, what was happening back then? Well, that was whenever we had the major worldwide financial collapse, right? And if you look in the Bitcoin blockchain, in the very first block, so it's Genesis block, or basically its birth, the author, Satoshi Nakamoto, which is a pseudonym and nobody knows who it is, if it's one person, if it's a guy or a girl, if it's a group of people, we don't know. In the very first block of Bitcoin, and a block is where all the transactional information is saved, and basically the metadata of Bitcoin, they make reference to a headline in some UK or London newspaper that says, "Chancellor approves second bailout for the banks." And whoever created Bitcoin was obviously creating it as a competitor to the financial system that was currently printing up a whole bunch of new money and passing it to their banking friends. And guess who pays for that new money that gets created? Well, we do, the money holders. Because if more money is created, inflation, into a system, then all the other money that's already in that system depreciates because there's more money in the system, but there's the same number of goods and services in that system. And this is, again, why I fell in love with gold and silver back in the day, because the government just can't print more gold. They just can't print more silver. They can't devalue the currency that we hold in our pocket in our bank account just by a printing press. And so Bitcoin had been in development and was released on the day that the UK government approved the second round of bailouts to the banks, because that signaled the time to launch Bitcoin as an alternative free market-based money. For the people, right? For the people to have another option of a scarce asset, this time digitally, to try to buy and preserve their wealth that was out of the control of the government's printing presses.
So that's an interesting concept in general of preserving wealth, because I think everyone wants to get rich quick, but beyond that, like, everyone wants, if they're going to be bothering to work hard for decades, they want that to be able to be passed on. And it seems like they've done a pretty good job, with, in Europe, families that have centuries of wealth and land and all these things, like, operating in the current system of preserving the wealth and passing it down. So what's the real, these let's say, the Duke of Earl or whatever, right?
Yep.
And then his son is able to preserve the family wealth, and they just keep getting richer and richer. Like theoretically, we could all figure out how to do that and have this long-term family wealth. So why is Bitcoin even needed in that sense?
Yeah. Well, how did the Duke of Earl protect his family's wealth back in the day, though? What would he buy?
I presume land.
Sure.
And was earning off, I don't know, farming, things like that.
Yeah. So he bought a scarce resource.
Okay.
Because the government just can't print up new land, right? And so he traded in his money that could be printed by someone, again, a counterparty risk, and he traded it in for something that had utility, land. You could farm it, you could build a house on it, you could raise your family on it, you could open up a resort on it, you could do whatever you want, build your business on it. And land is a good hedge, just like gold's a good hedge against paper money debasement. But if you had gold, he wouldn't have had to buy land. Right? He could just keep it in gold. And gold's a lot easier to keep than land. I mean, think about it. What if your land gets infected with a wild pack of wolves? Right? Now nobody wants to come on it because it's dangerous. Or it's full of poison and weeds and all this ridiculousness. Well, no, it loses value. Where gold, it just kind of stays gold. You put it in a box and it stays gold. But what about poor people? How are poor people going to buy land? Right? How do poor people? They don't. They're serfs. In the Duke of Earl's age, they were serfs. They had to work the land. Well, if they most likely kept their money in the king's script, the king's money, right? And the king prints as much as he wants. Granted, back then he would use gold, but what they would do is they would snip their gold. So they'd start snipping out, maybe 5 or 10% of the gold coins and melting those down and making new gold coins and then snipping out 5 to 10% of that. And that's how they inflated gold back in the day. Well, now, maybe it's illegal to hold a full ounce of gold that doesn't have the king's snip in it, right? And so they're at the disposal of the king and what he wants to do with his money. So with Bitcoin, unlike gold, could you buy 1,000th of an ounce of gold? Well, no, you can't, right? It's so small, you can't. I mean, it's dust in the air. That's why silver came in, right? And other things. But what if you were really poor? You can buy 1/1,000,000th of a Bitcoin, and it's way less than 1 cent. So even the poorest of the poor in the world, if they have any type of disposable income, can buy Bitcoin itself and have that as a rare and scarce good, granted digital good, that nobody can print more of outside of the open source nature of Bitcoin. You see how much inflation is coming. But nobody can steal it from you because it's not like it's in a bank account that the government can just come in and raid you and just take your money. Or like at Europe Pacific Bank, we'd freeze people's accounts and you had to give us all this information about you and your business partners and updated KYC docs and before we would unfreeze your bank account. Nobody can do that with Bitcoin. And you can buy a penny's worth of Bitcoin if you really want to. And so Bitcoin was created not for the wealthy, which a lot of people mistakenly think it was. But it was created for the poorest among us as an option to try to get out of the government-controlled, inflationary, reckless financial system where the government prints $600 billion and gives it to their banker friends.
And so, as with any technology, the first iteration may be limited in its utility, or, I know there's lots of other cryptocurrencies that are showing up these days. What are the opportunities for innovation in the crypto space? And for example, I think that Bitcoin has so many transactions per second, and other cryptos have more transactions. So how is cryptocurrency evolving?
Yeah. So Bitcoin was first established, as written in the Bitcoin white paper, as a peer-to-peer digital cash system. Basically, you could use this without the need for a financial institution to give you permission so that we could do business together peer-to-peer. I think it was a peer-to-peer electronic cash payment system was what it was classified as. Well, that's great. I mean, the first app on cryptocurrency, I mean, the first app on blockchain, just think about your iPhone. What was the first app on your iPhone? Well, no, okay, nobody probably knows because Apple probably had a lot of apps at launch, but the first application on blockchain was money, was Bitcoin. It was specifically designed, this app was designed as money. But now what's happened, and the first team in blockchain that tried to introduce this was Ethereum back in 2014, but what if we could program on a blockchain? Just like Amazon allows you to store files on the cloud, what if you could program on a blockchain that you could launch and it just kind of ran on this decentralized, distributed system that nobody owns. So you could launch your website or launch your application on this thing, this blockchain, and that if one person's server got DDoSed or taken down or confiscated, then that's just one node with thousands of other nodes to still support your website. You know, we see websites getting DDoS or taken offline because there's one centralized server that gets targeted maliciously and they overload that server and your website goes down. Well, what if that one overloaded server could just temporarily be taken offline and there's still 10,000 other servers that your website was running on that you can't DDoS all that? And so Ethereum had the idea of, what if we could create a blockchain not specifically designed as peer-to-peer electronic cash payment system, but as like an operating system, kind of like an iOS or a Linux or a Windows that ran in a decentralized, distributed nature. And so now we're seeing computer scientists think outside of the traditional Bitcoin and look for blockchains that can support different types of transactions, support different types of data, use different programming languages as their base programming language. And one of the most interesting is social media. You know, right now we see Facebook, and this is really timely for this interview actually, we see Facebook really under the gun for collecting who knows how much information on you, right? And who are they sharing it with? With the blockchain social media, and the largest one currently is the Steam blockchain. And I recommend you check it out by going to either steamit.com or my personal favorite, busy.org. And this is a blockchain that, unlike Bitcoin, who is specifically designed for money, this blockchain was specifically designed as a social media, to handle and manage social media. So you go on and you post just like you would post on medium.com or maybe your WordPress site or maybe Facebook or Twitter, and it posts onto the blockchain without needing to trust a centralized company. So nobody owns your data. What you put on the blockchain, you put out there, right? If I write a blog post, then the contents of that blog post is uploaded to the blockchain and it's there permanently. Yeah, you can delete things from Facebook, but are you deleting them from Facebook servers? Well, probably not, right? Because they're data mining you. If you're going to put stuff out into the open, you might as well know that a third party doesn't control it and that you don't have to have their permission to post it, because what if you're censored? So you see this Steam blockchain, it's STEEM, and there are people starting to build on top of it. Yeah, you can run a standard blog. If you go to busy.org, you can just post a regular blog. Or since it supports various types of content, you can go to DTube, right? I think it's d.tube, and it's basically a decentralized version of YouTube, where if your channel on YouTube got shut down, then you can go to DTube and there is no shutting down of your channel because you're posting it not to Google's or YouTube servers, you're posting it to a blockchain, right? And so it works very well for censorship. Another interesting thing for the whole Steam ecosystem that includes DTube and steamit.com and busy.org, and there's another one called dSound, which is basically a decentralized sound cloud. There's one called Zappl, Z-A-P-P-L, which is a decentralized Twitter, right? There's one that's built specifically for memes called dmania.lol, right? They only support memes and images, basically, but they're all just websites that offer you access to the same blockchain. And this is revolutionary, and this is why I give so many presentations on Steam specifically, and just decentralized blockchain-based social media, is if you post something, if you use, let's say, steamit.com, and you post a new blog post, you can go over to busy.org and see that exact same blog post as if you submitted it on their site, because you're not submitting it to a site. Just like when you submit something to Facebook, you're submitting it to Facebook servers. Mm-hmm. Whenever you submit something on one of these Steam-based social media sites, you're submitting it to the blockchain. And since all blockchain transactions are transparent and open and visible, then anyone can display the information that was submitted to that blockchain on their website. And so I could create a website called ashesbestcatblogs.com. Actually, that's not a good. Let's say libertarian blog post, right? Or whatever. I could allow people through my website to submit blog posts to the Steam blockchain. And those blog posts would also be visible on steamit.com and on busy.org. So you can submit to one place and have your content available to anyone that wants to build a front-end website to access that content. And whereas in Bitcoin, the people that get rewarded with the new Bitcoins that get created are only the miners, in a blockchain-based social media platform, the people who get rewarded with the new cryptocurrency that gets created, the inflation, are the content creators and the content curators. So whenever I post on Facebook, maybe I get 20 likes. Might put a smile on my face. But whenever I post on Steam or on busy.org, all those upvotes have a monetary value associated with them, and I might make $20 or $30. I've made several $100s on blog posts in Steam, and I've cashed it out, right? Nobody really buys or sells the Steam currency. Send it to an exchange, because you get paid out in the Steam currency, which is the native currency for that blockchain. Trade your Steam for Bitcoin, sell your Bitcoin for Thai baht, and then go and have a good night.
Go and have some champagne.
go pop some bottles.
So there's a bajillion cryptocurrencies, right?
Yeah, there's at this point. I mean, I can remember when there were less than 50, but I think there's thousands and thousands and thousands now.
Why are there so many?
Currency competition, because unlike the legacy system where only the government could create currencies and they forced you into their currency system, we've now transcended that where anybody can create their currency and anybody can create their money. Ashe coin, for instance. There is no Ashe coin. Don't look at it. It doesn't exist, and as far as I'm concerned, it will never exist. But when anyone can create their currency or their money, it means that competition's good, right? One of the problems with the U.S. dollar is there's not a lot of competition for it. That's why overall, over time, the purchasing power of the dollar is going down and down. Back in the day, a McDonald's hamburger used to cost 10 cents. And now I don't know how much it costs, but I'm sure it's more than 10 cents. A haircut used to be, 20 cents, and now it's $20. And so with like everything else in the free market, do you want there to be one car manufacturer, one computer manufacturer, one producer of wine? Well, no, you don't. You want as many as possible so you know that the best are going to bubble up to the top. Same thing with currency, same thing with money. You want as many people producing as much different types of money with various iterations and changes and differences so that the best money is found and it bubbles up to the top. So, we just haven't had the opportunity up to this point to create our own money because, it's been illegal. A buddy of mine, I won't say any names or even say the city, but a buddy of mine in high school, right when inkjet printers were coming out, I was working at an office supply store, and he came in and bought the best inkjet printer and the resume paper with the most cotton in it that he could, and he printed up $10 bills. Right? He basically just at home he printed up $10 bills, and he was counterfeiting. He was like, well, the government can do it. Why can't I? Right? And so now we get to do that, but we get to create currency that's not the government's currency. And so it brings currency competition. And this is how cryptocurrencies are going to bring down the state. Because the state only has the power that it wields because it has a monopoly on money. And so if they finally have competition on money, everything else crumbles. And so now anybody can create your cryptocurrency. That doesn't mean it has any value, right? If I did have Ashe coin, I'm like, I've got these Ashe coins. Well, the value is 1 Bitcoin for 1 Ashe coin. I'm going to give you 100 Ashe coins. Why don't you give me 100 Bitcoins? You're like, you're crazy. But what if I could somehow create this Ashe coin in a way that people demanded it, and eventually it had value, and then it's actual money and currency. So yeah, bring them on.
If Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is going to bring down the state, I know we were getting into speculative, but what does that even look like? Like, what do you expect to happen?
Yeah, and I don't think they're going to bring down the state. I think that, the state is a company or an organization that's based off of aggressive force. And so in the long term, that business model isn't a good one. If you look at restaurants or bars or, the person you rent your apartment from, are they forcing you to do that, or are you kind of agreeing upon it in a voluntary nature? But the state isn't a voluntary run company.
But America started off as a voluntary sort of like, we're going to create our own.
Yeah, they tried to be a republic, right? But I didn't sign the Constitution. I don't agree with the Constitution. I don't want to be bound to the people who signed the Constitution. I don't agree with it, right? I don't agree with any of the amendments. I don't agree with the amendment that says I have to pay income tax. And so I do pay my taxes because I don't want these assholes to throw me in jail. But I didn't sign any of this stuff. It was one way where I can't say no. So one thing that will end the state over time will be the freedom of money. We've had separate, and this takes a long time because everyone goes to these public schools and they're propagandized and believing that the government is righteous and necessary because the government runs the schools. Think about if you went to a school that was run by Walmart. You'd probably think Walmart was really looking great, right? And I don't know if they are or not. I mean, I think they are, but maybe you don't. But we all go to schools run by the same company for the most part, the government. We have separation of the church in the state. We have separation, religion in the state. We have the freedom of speech, so the separation of speech in the state. One of the most important things is the separation of money in state. And that's what cryptocurrency has finally introduced to us. It just it sheds the counterparty risk of government. Coming back to the theme of pretty much this whole conversation, back in the day, we didn't have the tools or the technology to really organize ourselves as societies, and people organized as governments and created courts and laws and fire departments and police departments and all this stuff that was centrally run. We had to depend on this central organization, the central company called the government, to provide these services. But now we have technology, we have global internet, we have global communications, global money, and we're shedding every single centralized organization that has historically provided benefit to society, but under the ruse of involuntary action. So everything that is centralized right now is being brought into question, and at the root of it, money is the most centralized and one of the most important aspects of life. And so, Federal Reserve, be warned.
So what's next for you in sort of your participation in blockchain and what you're creating or how you're living?
Yeah, I've been in this space for a long time. And even before crypto, I understood the role of free market money. The role of free market money to help someone create a free lifestyle. And for me, Bitcoin and crypto is just one aspect of that. Where I see myself going is trying to build businesses and create discussions and prompt curiosity around the ideas of non-aggression and voluntary action, win-win scenarios, and try to show how entrepreneurs specifically are building freedom, not only for themselves, but they're building goods and services that other people desire, and they do it voluntarily. And so for me, it's trying to continue to spread the ideas that peace is popular. And maybe I do that from an economics angle, like you've heard in this podcast, or a libertarian. I don't even like the word libertarian because it's been co-opted. I would call myself an anarchist, an anarcho-capitalist specifically. But these are words that have labels on them that most people react to emotionally, and they don't have the capacity to be curious what these labels mean without judging them instantly. So what I like to do is I don't feel the need to push my beliefs on people because that's not how it works. And so when I get asked to speak at conferences, I speak, or at meetups, I speak, and I always try to interweave the ideas of voluntary action and how we can build freedom instead of fight for freedom. Because if you're fighting against who you assume to be your oppressors, you're playing into their game, and that's exactly what they want you to do because they're already oppressing you, and they've built the system which you're trying to revolt against. And they're really smart. And so why don't we just build the world that we want to live in rather than trying to change the current legacy systems that oppress us? And so that's really my mission in life, is showing people how you build freedom rather than how you fight for freedom. Because I just don't believe that fighting against someone is the most efficient use of time, money, or energy.
Wow. I love that.
Dramatic pause.
Even though I think sometimes it's motivating to have someone to fight against.
Sure.
I think it's more practical to... I just like the way you phrase that. That's fascinating. It's if for the listener, if you can't tell that I'm trying to understand all of this and direct the interview at the same time. This is like me asking the professor all the questions in class. So that's a great place to wrap. Ash, what's the best place for people to find you?
You can find me at libertyentrepreneurs.com. At Liberty E Podcast on Twitter, or Facebook.com/LibertyEntrepreneurs. If you want to get in touch with me personally, I'm on Twitter, Ashe, ASHE _Oro, ORO. No, it's not my real last name, but Oro does mean gold in Spanish.
That's what I was thinking.
But yeah, Ashe Oro. Soon I'll be launching AsheOro.com. If you want to book me to speak, then you can contact me through the website.
Brilliant. Ash, thanks for having... Nope. I was having you on the show.
Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on my...
Yeah, it's been great.
And thanks for the...
Yeah, cheers to the wine. Empty glasses of wine.
All right. All right, how about that episode with Ashe Oro? Check him out. He has a podcast as well. Most of his interviews are episodes around the topics that we were covering today. I did an interview on his show as well, which may or may not be out by the time you're listening to this. And ultimately, living with Ashe and learning from him led me to start investing a little bit more into the cryptocurrency space. Hopefully, this got you to a place where you know a little bit more and probably makes you want to investigate even further, because this is a whole new world, and people that spend their full days working on crypto still are not able to keep up with all the developments in the crypto and blockchain space. So if you liked this interview, if it's something that you want to recommend to a friend, I would love for you to do that. If you'd like to leave a review on iTunes and let us know how we're doing with the show, that really helps as well. It keeps the show up in the rankings when we get ratings and reviews on iTunes, which helps it get out to more people. And I'd also love for you to support the show by buying superconductors when it comes out in July. A lot of the interviews from The Art of Adventure went into making superconductors. It's a great condensing and analysis of many of the things that people have said over the years. And of course, The Art of Adventure is free. And one way that you can support the show would be to purchase a copy of the book for yourself and another copy for your best friend. So would love for you to do that. Let me know what you got most out of this episode and if it piqued your interest anywhere into discovering more about crypto and blockchain and money and all of those things. Thanks so much for listening today. Now it's your turn to go out there and be adventurous.